Wait, don't scroll down. Don't look at the comments until the end of the video. Trust me, it'll be worth it. First of all, I just want to thank each and every one of you for subscribing and watching my content. 5,000 subscribers is a giant milestone for me, and the amount of support all of you have shown with everything I've done, from Hunt Showdown to Darkwood, Dead Space, and even voice acting, is simply astonishing. I love seeing your reactions and reading your comments, and to be honest, the interaction with each and every one of you is one of the most rewarding experiences I've found in my life. I can't thank you enough. Now, with that said, the majority of you voted for me to write my own story and narrate it, and even with my limited budget, I'm very happy with the end result. But I can't wait to hear your opinion about it. So without further ado, here's the 5,000 subscriber special. In a small forest, in a deep valley, somewhere where clouds and rain seemed a little more common than anything else, nestled at the very top of the greatest oak within the forest, Curly the bear sat safe and dry within his little tree house, tucked away in his favorite chair under a nice warm blanket, his favorite book in one hand and a warm cup of cocoa in the other. And it was there, with the subtle drums of the gentle rain tapping against his roof and windows, right in the middle of his favorite passage, just as the knight was about to slay the dragon and free the kingdom, that he thought he heard someone outside his window. Confused, Curly lifted his head, looking to the tiny frame of wood and glass, where the small droplets of rain trickled down in long serpentines. He smiled and shook his head. Surely it would be impossible for anyone to be outside of his window, unless they could fly. Curly turned his attention back to his book. However, once again, as the plot slowly built towards the climax, he thought he heard a voice outside his window. And this time, his curiosity got the better of him, so he decided to get up. As Curly looked outside, he saw nothing but gray clouds and the seeping rain above him. But down below, in the wet and leafy forest of Mirkwood, far out in the distance, just before the entrance to Skull Cavern, he saw a line of lights slowly dancing through the narrow path in the woodland. Interesting, Curly thought to himself, as a slight curiosity tinkled in his stomach. He knew the Harvest Festival was right around the corner, and perhaps the Rabbit Twins, or some of the others, had planned something particularly festive for the annual party. Curly, being the nosiest of the bunch in Mirkwood, couldn't shake the feeling that the lights drew him in, and the closer he looked at the waving and dancing flickers in the distance, the more he was certain he heard someone calling his name. Whatever it was, it enticed him, begging him to get closer, and before he realized, he had thrown on his red parka and rain boots, grabbed his trusty lantern, and found himself running through the muddy forest floor, hoping to catch up with the warm and enticing glow of the dancing lights. The puddles sprung and splashed in all directions as Curly slushed down through the wet forest road. He followed the stream of Mirkwood Brook, certain that the subtle ripple of the soft current was cheering him on as he made his way through the forest. At the end of the stream, Curly finally reached Skull Cavern, where the Mirkwood Brook continued into the mouth of the jaw-like opening in the rock formation. Odd, Curly thought to himself as he looked around. The dancing lights were gone, nowhere to be seen. He was certain the Rabbit Twins wouldn't venture into Skull Cavern. No one would. The odd rock formation that towered above the tree line, resembling a cracked skull with its tunnels leading deep down underground, had a well-known rumor of being cursed. Every animal within Mirkwood knew this. Curly looked around again to be sure. Certainly, they wouldn't have gone in there. But they... Curly hesitated. He wasn't sure if he dared to enter, but as a distant laughter from within the cave caught his attention, the thought of the others preparing something festive without him fed his curiosity and drew him in. With the lantern in his hand and a tinkling curiosity in his stomach, Curly entered the jaw of Skull Cavern and slowly slushed through the entrance, while his rain boots kicked up water from the small stream beneath his feet. As the cave narrowed and led him deeper underground, He thought he heard the wind that whistled through the cavern whisper his name. As he got deeper and deeper into the cave, it only seemed to get warmer and warmer. A welcome change of climate, Curly thought, considering the cold and muddy weather they usually had around these parts. The walls around him started to sweat, pearls and droplets of moisture running down the rough texture of rocks, glistening in the light of his lantern. With the soft wind on his shoulders gently caressing him, Curly let the warm breeze embrace him as it guided him forward. Carried by the wind, Curly followed the tunnel, the stream below his feet still accompanying him, as the two ventured into the cave. While it got more and more narrow, the further he went in. The walls and ceiling narrowed to a point where Curly could barely stand upright. With his feet kicking up water as he marched on, he wondered how Maurice the bear, the biggest of the bunch in Mirkwood, would have gotten down here, seeing that there was barely enough room for Curly. But suddenly, his thoughts were interrupted by the taste of iron in his mouth, a sweet and almost sickening aroma. Curly frowned. He recognized the taste. Blood. The sensation filled his mouth, followed by a faint smell of raw meat. Curly shook. The cave had suddenly become cold, and the chilled air around him bit into his skin. The smell of meat grew more and more intense with every step he moved forward, and as he looked down, he noticed the water beneath his boots had started to change color. Slowly, the traces of lightish red in the water turned to a deep crimson saturation, and as Curly looked up, taking his eyes off of the stream, he froze. In front of him, at the very edge of the lantern's revealing light, were two silhouettes, lying on the floor of the cave, motionless. The smell of wet, raw meat hung in the air around him, and as he cautiously stepped forward, the lantern illuminated enough of the silhouettes for Curly's eyes to catch the ears of both of the rabbit twins. Curly stumbled backwards in a gasp as a slippery rock took away his footing, sending him tumbling into the shallow stream. As the blood-soaked water ran down his face, he frantically reached for his lantern and turned his eyes back on the twins. They were mutilated. Their bodies had been partially skinned and torn apart. The bare muscles beneath the fur revealed deeply torn teeth marks. Their skulls had been crushed, jaws broken and teeth pulled. Their legs had been twisted and torn out of their sockets. Curly felt sick, his hands trembling as he stumbled back to his feet. He needed to get out. Whatever had done this had to be close. He spun around, but immediately stopped in his tracks. The lantern didn't illuminate anything in front of him. No floor, no ceiling, no cave, nothing but darkness. No matter how far he stretched out his arm, it seemed permanent, consuming, as if the darkness itself was suffocating the light of his lantern. Hesitant, Curly didn't dare to step forward, afraid that he would stumble on the slippery rocks again. But then, from the darkness, came a slow, rancid smell of putrid flesh permeating the air around him. Curly grimaced, covering his nose as he took a step back. The smell brought to mind the most horrible of thoughts: rot, decay, and death. Curly suddenly froze in place. The hair on the back of his neck stood up, and a cold shiver ran down his spine. Even though his eyes couldn't see through the black void of darkness in front of him, Curly was certain that something was staring at him. Too terrified to move a muscle, he tried to gasp for air, but the deep-rooted fear of imminent death was unmistakable. There was something right in front of him. He noticed that the wind wasn't whispering his name anymore, but rather sounded like the distorted howling of maimed animals. The smell of rot and decay saturated the cave as a painful moan from something tormented right in front of him echoed throughout the cavern. Frightened, he turned around to run, but fell face first into a pool of bones and guts as he stumbled on the bodies of the rabbit twins. On his knees, with blood dripping down his face, he frantically clawed away at the broken limbs and bodies, only to be met by a dead end of rock and stone. Confused and perplexed, his hands frantically scrambled across the cave wall in front of him, eyes and hands searching for the exit, but there was none. His nails were torn from his fingers as he clawed at the wall, stripes of blood smearing the coarse surface as he tore the skin off of his hands. But it was too late, and he felt the wet stench of death breathing down his neck.